So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yirmiyahu the prophet, let's make an evaluation. Who was this specific prophet, where Israel itself has destroyed him, and what led the nation to destroy its own prophet? He is one of the most important prophets, and then we can understand through his prophecies what went on during his time versus then what he was prophesying in the future as far as the coming of the Messiah, the completion of the spring feast, and then the completion of the autumn feast and post-autumn feast. So then, let's make an evaluation what leads a nation then to destroy its own prophet. Firstly then, let's evaluate personal desires and personal pleasures. Then let's make another evaluation as far as religion versus the holy instructions and making a pleasure out of them rather than obedience. I think this truly gives us an understanding why then the nations are so far away from the Creator himself, because people they tend to make what is important a pleasure for themselves. People don't want to put their lives on the line. And the Messiah himself said that in this world his people would have trouble, because in order to be obedient, the people must understand the holy instructions and teaching them, and also understanding the holy prophecies, because they point the directives of the future. Now, many people they try to gather this information and making pleasure for themselves. They want to enjoy of the world a bit, and at the same time they want to make obedience as a factor of their own playing. So let's make this extremely clear. People they want to be obedient and do what God says to do and observe. However, they do in a fashion where then they do as far as it is pleasurable. As long as they are linked with the world's spirit and leading them in a certain way, yet they tend themselves to blend with partial obedience of their own and trying to enjoy the world. The Messiah himself has said, either one, but not both. So then, what has led the nation of Israel to destroy its own prophet? It was not only Yirmiyahu the prophet. It was nearly every prophet. They want to destroy it, because Israel wants to make pleasure for themselves. They have a sense of obedience of their own. So let's read then from the most important prophet, the Messiah himself. Let's read then a section of the 24th chapter of Mitchiyahu. He was obviously a priest, Mitchiyahu, and he was very acquainted with the works of the temple. Reading from his prophecies and linking up with the Messiah, let's then evaluate what the Messiah then is doing. He is teaching the word of the Creator Yahweh himself, and the people they had their reservations as far as what he was saying. They were acquainted with many sections of the holy instructions, yes they were, but they wanted to make the outcome of their obedience on their own ways. God, the Creator, is not out there in the midst of the skies as a person or a service boy and trying then to do pleasure with his own words and his own instructions for the pleasure of the world. That's not the point. If you are a person making a mockery out of the Word of God Himself and trying then to be obedient to a certain way and not obedient to the whole, then the Torah makes of no use. That's why the Messiah himself said, when they are engaged on doing their own works, their worship and their obedience has no worth. So then, this is true for any congregation, any group of people, and even the people of the law, those who know the instructions so much, yet they want to work the events and situations for their own pleasures. As long as it links up with the world and what the world can give as an exchange for their own part of this obedience, then they are fine with it. They go by what is convenient, and what is not convenient then they get rid of. But then when the truth is becoming then obvious, then they try to block themselves, so then they put their lives on the line. The name is a spirit of self-preservation using personal pleasures. So then, and Messiah went out of the temple and he departed. Obviously he was in a place where then the people welcomed him, and his disciples drew near and were showing him the construction of the temple. Try to understand the tone the disciples are speaking of. They are not speaking of a tone of the holy instructions. Oh no. They are speaking in a tone of the works of their own hands. And his disciples drew near and were showing him the construction of the temple. Was the temple an order from the Creator? No. It was not. That's precisely what the people were then engaging themselves in, trying to make pleasures out of them. But he said to them, Behold, don't you observe these? Truly I say to you, nothing will to be spared. In other words, he said, not one stone will to be left upon another, and it won't be thrown down. So the Messiah then, he was directly against the pleasurable words and events the disciples then were trying to speak him in. So what was the objective of the disciples? They want to make the Messiah king and relax, Try to enjoy the world, Want to sit back and, you are the Messiah, you know the word, you know the instructions, you have miracles under your belt. What the heck? Well, watch this nice temple. We can make you then the king, you can be the chief of this temple, as long as you give the people what they want. And the Messiah was then, we sat in the Mount of Olives, and his disciples then drew near and were saying amongst themselves to him, So then, since you do not want our own understanding the way things should be, watch the evil tone of the disciples. And they were disciples. So then, say to us, as far as these situations you are speaking of, and how then the world is going to end. Since you do not want to make yourself then king and help us to become what we were then back during the time of Solomon, and having some pleasurable times, then what is it then of the end of the world? And the objective of the Messiah was showing his people the autumn feast. And they, in turn, they were making mockery out of it. So then, why Israel has destroyed its own prophets? Truly, the Messiah said, if a person is not engaged with the holy instructions, as far as doing what heaven wants a person to do and observe in enlightenment of the events from the prophets. We are not talking regarding understanding the Torah and then wishing the events is going to be in line of what they wish. That's the problem with Israel. They study so much the Torah, they study and they study and they study. Fine. And then, in the future, they want to manipulate for their own use. Scoundrels. That's what they are. They should be reading the Holy Torah and then understanding the prophets. What the prophets has obviously pointed to the future, studying the Torah and studying the prophets and understanding the events the Creator Himself has set for the future. If people are engaged in events and situations regarding pleasurable things, and then they can inflate themselves with the pride and dignity of their own, the Messiah said they won't earn the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever works they are engaged upon of their own pleasures, it won't work. Let's continue on. Then the Messiah was there. He sat in the Mount of Olives, and his disciples drew near and saying amongst themselves, so then, you don't want to do the way our understanding is. So then, at the very least, say what you think of the end of the world. They are making mockery out of what the Messiah was speaking. And the Messiah said to them, because he knew very precisely, be aware, let no man deceive you. The very point, even though the disciples were speaking and giving him the forward motion of the situation or of the conversation, and he said, okay, so then say what then the end of the world is going to be. Yet the Messiah knew they did this as evil. Yet the Messiah said, let no man deceive you, because you, boy, are thinking as scoundrels. He didn't say it, this is precisely what they did. For many wilt come in my name. So then, why has he said, for many wilt come in my name? Because the disciples, they were acting as saviors. Read the content of the situation. That they were in the temple, they were then receiving teachings. And the disciples, they got a bit cocky. And then they came out and tried to show him what they have done with their own hands. Then, what was the answer of the Messiah? Not a stone is going to be left upon another. What you are trying to build with your own hands, outside of the holy instructions, won't last very long. Then, obviously, they were sort of set aside for some time. Then they got in their senses and they said, well, so then say what is going on then with the end of the world. And then the Messiah said on top of it, let no man deceive you. Because the situation that you want is not on the holy instructions. You want the holy instructions to make events of the future and pleasurable future in manipulating the future. It's not the way it's going to work. So Israel and the people of God, they are involved with so many feasts, so many understandings and ministries and events, yet they don't hear what the prophets are saying. Yes, they do study the holy instructions, they do study the Torah, and they are obedient and so on and so forth, but they concoct theories of events of the future based from this world's spirit in order to manipulate the future, so then it's in line with what they want. There won't be a third temple. And what most of Israel is doing, they are working towards of building the new temple, or the third temple. Now Israel is becoming a point of becoming stupid. They built the first temple, didn't work, it was destroyed. A second temple was built, didn't work, was destroyed. And the Messiah said, it is enough, not a stone is going to be left upon another, and the third temple won't be built. What else has the Messiah said? For many will come in my name and will say, oh, Messiah. What a word the disciples are trying to do. They are trying to manipulate the future and claiming themselves as directives of becoming then saviors. And many they will to deceive. That's then most of Israel, they don't speak of the prophets. Because they don't want to have the Creator Himself in the future awaiting for their obedience. No, they want to do themselves. They want to hear the instructions, they want to do their own ways. That's why we have leaders of the church drinking. They go into feasts and they gorge themselves with alcoholics. People, they go beyond what they should. They dance and they are drunk. Just like the world. Then the Messiah has said, for you are bound to hear of war and rumors of wars. So the Messiah then, rather than giving them pleasure, what the Messiah has said, prepare yourselves as soldiers because you are going to hear of war and rumors of wars. He's already saying what's coming in the future. You must prepare yourself and change your pleasure-minded understandings to what is coming. Now Israel rejects the Messiah. Most of them do. And the Messiah said, watch out and do not be disturbed, for it is required that these situations take place, but the end is not yet. So then, what was the Messiah's objective? Is the Messiah concerned with an event? With a feast? Is he concerned with the Hanukkah, Feast of Lights? When the people are not understanding what the prophets are saying, what they do has no value. They can do as many as they want, as far as they want, for how long as they want. The Creator Himself, He simply turns His face away. The Creator Himself does not want His people be involved with His Word, with His holy instructions, if they do not hearken the words of His prophets. Much more so when the leadership of the congregation then is involved with the drinking. Then let me ask you this. Was the Messiah harsh? Was he rough? Why was then the situation came to this ending. What the Messiah was saying is, don't be stupid in trying to make this ridiculous temple a focus of your own works. What was the order that Moses received on the desert? Build a tent. And he gave the measurements and the understandings of these. This truly is what the Creator wants. That's why the Messiah has said, prostitutes and thieves are going to earn the kingdom of heaven before you people of the law who are engaged in your own works. Now, when a person spends 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years involved so much, and they think at some point they can change the world, the culture in Brazil is not the same as in the United States. But some people, they think they can use lies and cheats of the holy instructions for their own pleasures. And they think they're going to conquer the world. Every time we are engaged in the holy instructions and doing what the Messiah said to do and observe as per the order of Moses, as we hear the prophets and we want to be obedient to what the prophets had said, people, they turn their backs in such a fast way they would not believe it. Because they want the enjoyment of the Torah, and they want to expect the future to be manipulated for their own pleasures. Did you know you can be evil doing what the instructions are saying if we don't hear the prophets? And I truly do not care if you are a rabbi or any kind of a person or a leader, and you are then 50 years studying the Holy Torah and you know the instructions from cover to cover. If you neglect the prophets, what you have learned is unworthy. So get these into your mind. We are during a time of transformation, of transition, and we must hear what the prophets are saying. Yeshayahu, whom the Israelites had destroyed, is the very person giving directives of the future. And then the situation of being humble. People can understand the Holy Torah being prideful. If we understand what the prophets are saying, then we can protect ourselves from our own destructive works. I saw people with my own eyes. Congregation, drinking wine and old wine and sour wine and playing around and dancing and being drunk. And then they go to the Shabbat as, holy and holy and holy, Either there is a distinction from those who are doing what God said to do and observe, or simply they don't do it. Let's evaluate what the Messiah has said. There they were in a temple, and the Messiah was teaching. And then the Messiah went out of the temple and departed. And his disciples drew near and were showing him the construction of the temple. Watch how evil they are. They were not concerned with the whole instructions the Messiah a few minutes earlier was then teaching. They were concerned with the building of the temple, the works of their own hands. And the Messiah said, I got nothing to do with you. But he said in other words, because he gave a tone of teaching even though he was then involved by evil with their own people. And he said to them, Behold, don't you observe these? Not a stone is going to be left upon another. What you are expecting from the works of your own hands, it won't last. Prophet Daniel has explained very precisely what's coming up towards Israel. So then, as far as we can understand from Daniel, what is going on then with Israel? They are doing their own thing. They are manipulating politics. They are manipulating religions. They are doing what they think is right for them to do and observe. And the Messiah, when he observes them doing this and not listening to what the prophets are saying, he simply despises. Daniel chapter 11 explains what goes on then later on when the first holy city on the land of Cush is then set up. Then we find later on then these people who are then the sons of Ishmael or then Isel preparing themselves to make Egypt as their headquarters. Then they will invade the glorious land. Liking it or not, this is truly what's coming. Precisely. It is then recorded on chapter 11, verse 17. You can read for yourself. Now, you can pray, read the Torah as much as you want. What the prophet said must take place, and it will. So then, before we go around and try to make ourselves important from the works of our own hands, let's make sure we read what the prophets are saying. Next time I'm going to evaluate more based from what's going on in the world. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.